My name is Samantha, and I'll be your host today. And a huge thank you again to Suffolk University's Sawyer Business School for hosting this conference. As you may have noticed arriving, this downtown location is the perfect hub for exploring Boston's innovation ecosystem and learning from industry leaders. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the entire greater Boston and New England startup community, all industries, all startup departments, and all bootstrapped and funding stages for 5 days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer, and the folks working the conference today here are all volunteering their time. So thank you for attending this conference. It is a labor of love, and we appreciate you playing a role in shaping our startup community. Thank you so much again for attending Startup Boston Week. Now on to the session.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, everyone. This is awesome. Very, very happy to be here. It's amazing, 7 years and how much it's grown. So a fantastic job to the team. We'll start with a couple of quick introductions. So my name is Jean Donnelly. I'm a COO at Sandbox Banking. I am an engineer by training, started my career in aircraft engines. If anyone wants to know how an aircraft engine works, I can describe it in four words, which I'll do if anyone wants to ask me afterwards. Started my career at General Electric in that area, and GE was very good at moving people from one business to another. So then I moved to GE Capital, may it rest in peace, which did a lot of the financing options in their insurance division. I spent a few years. Then I went to Fidelity Investments. And moved from their insurance division into their asset management division. Then I decided to get back to my engineering roots, went to a company called Enernoc, which got acquired by Enel. So if people are familiar with the clean tech energy, a lot of that Enernoc team went on to do other startups and founders, including a bunch of folks went to Toast and to some other really interesting startups. Then I was asked by people I worked at Fidelity to say, hey, we're trying to stand up the fintech ecosystem, and we know startups need data, and we've got this idea that we could convince some partners in data to give access to their data for free to startups. So the FinTech Sandbox was born, and they're like, hey, can you help us stand this up? So I ran that for about 5 or 6 years until I had the opportunity to come to Sandbox Banking. So I've been here about 3.5 years as a COO.
And my name is Isman Sowole. I'm a senior solution analyst, senior solution engineer at Sandbox Banking. I studied finance undergrad, was initially planning on going into finance, did summer internship at JPM, but eventually really liked working as an engineer, joined Sandbox Banking, and I've been here for 2 years, assisting banks send data back and forth between systems and make their processes more efficient. Mm-hmm.
And Eastman has a unique skill set that one of the things we look for is people who love to talk to customers and like to code, which is a pretty unique combination for sure. In terms of, so Sky Azard is our CTO who would have been here as well, but his wife had a baby. So he is on paternity leave, which is great. I'm glad that people are doing it and taking it. So they're very, very happy, but I'm sure we can also, if folks have questions for Sky that they'd like to, connect with, we can also make that happen. First is the founding story for Sandbox Banking. Yep. So Ravi and Sky both worked at Harvard Management Company. Ravi, they're both engineers by training. Ravi was a portfolio manager, investing commodities for the fund, and Sky was a developer. And they, realized, they wanted to have these tools, investment tools for their friends and family. So versus just, helping Harvard make more money. So they decided to leave. And I pretty much met them right after that. And they're like, hey, yeah, we want to do this. We want to build a product. Hey, I hear you at FinTech Sandbox, you have data. Can we have data? I was like, well, you got to have a product to take the data in, right? You need at least an alpha product to be able to take the data. Like, right. So they went off and built a product in 2 weeks, and then came back and said, okay, now we have a product. Can you give us data? And I was like, well, they're they're going to work their butts off to make this happen. So let's see how we can, help them do that. So, so they really started, this is probably 2014, 2015, focused on what's called AlphaPack Co., which was a robo-advisory product to really help the marketplace. And what they did is they had a couple pilots with banks and credit unions where the bankers were looking for a tool that they could use with their customers. And so they quickly realized in that scenario, it didn't matter what sort of fintech application you had, connecting it to banking core systems was a huge, hairy problem and very painful and was very limiting. So they pivoted and decided to build a new product, an IDE, basically that connects banking core systems to different applications. We call it Glue with a Y in it because it glues systems together. It's not really a crazy name there. But yeah, so that was kind of the founding story of really how the team, very smart people, could say, hey, let's go after a big, hairy problem and see if we can help fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I saw some folks in the audience when you said core integration is a difficult problem, nodding. And those of us who've done it, we all know the struggle. So I think one thing that's really interesting, speaking of core integration, is as we work with customers, particularly bankers, language barriers. As an engineer, we understand the APIs, we understand the technology, but when a banker talks about different rates, different products, and especially bankers, I don't think they have a great reputation for making things very simple to understand. So I think it's very interesting working with bankers because there's a lot of translation that needs to happen. You need to be able to ask a lot of questions, to be the idiot in the room sometimes, which is tough as an engineer, to understand what the needs of the banker is, the value that they're looking to get first, and then afterwards you can deliver on the technology problem. So it's quite interesting because you end up finding that even though core integration is a very difficult thing to accomplish, the most difficult thing actually is the core integration plus understanding what the bankers want and then delivering on that in a timely manner. And we've managed to accomplish bringing down the time to delivery of these projects from about 9 to 12 months to about 3 months. And a lot of that is making the technology simpler to use for engineers, but then also understanding across different banks what's common. Even though they all have their own internal products, their lingo, what is the commonality across them? And then how can we ask questions that helps us understand what is unique about each individual bank?
So just a follow-up on that. When you first came, how much knowledge did you have of like community banks and credit unions?
Next to zero. So when I say being the idiot in the room and asking a lot of questions, it was very much the idiot in the room for a very long period of time. Or at least it felt like a very long period of time. And you have to ask a lot of simple questions because one thing at one bank can mean a different thing at another bank. So sometimes you'll have to ask what an adjustable rate is just to make sure that it's not a variable rate because sometimes they're the same thing across different banks. But you ask questions like that and the banker will be like, well, wow, what an idiot. What is an adjustable rate? A rate that adjusts, but some banks have different definitions. So sometimes you have to ask those types of questions, but then it stops you from down the road building out some logic. And then when it's time to test, then you will look like an idiot as well. So you're going to end up looking like an idiot at some point.
So comfort with that.
Yes, you have to be comfortable with that. And especially as the company scales and you deal with several more customers, you're going to have to encounter this issue many more times. But eventually you'll learn and it gets easier over time. So speaking of growing the company, when do you realize it's time to expand the roles that are in the company when, let's say, we have a very strong engineering organization, but when do we realize we need to add in folks on the sales side, on the market side, et cetera?
Yeah. So, for a little context, when I joined the company, I was the eighth employee or so. We were 8 people. It was about 75%, technical roles. And now we're at about 35 people. And I was doing the math. We're actually still at 75% technical roles, but the ratios in terms of people, has changed. As we've grown, some of the things that really dictate when you need to expand into other skill sets is if you're using the term peanut buttering, peanut butter spread, if you're asking your engineers to do well, why don't you do a little bit of this activity, or why don't you do a little bit of that activity, and people are having to spend more than 50% of their time outside of the role they were hired for, that's one indication, you have to start saying this is enough repeatable tasks that it isn't a short-term need, it's a repeatable need. Let's define it and let's, see what we need in order to make that happen. I think the other thing is as you grow, so we're at about 97 customers today, so banks and credit unions across the US and Canada. As you kind of grow, you move into different customer sophistication. So your early adopters, right, you have kind of your adopter curve. Your early adopters are very patient with technical companies, right, because they appreciate smart people. It's a solution that they know that they need. But as your customer base grows, you run into more folks that aren't quite as technically sound or understand that opportunity, and maybe a little more risk averse. In banking, a little more risk averse happens pretty quickly. So you realize you need to kind of bring in people with experience in the different fields who can really round out what you have there. And then the third, indicator is say you try to outsource the problem. You bring in a contractor, you try to experiment on that side, or say, how do we ramp this slowly, when you realize outsourcing isn't working anymore because that individual isn't as connected to your day-to-day business, so they don't understand all the other challenges that are going on and just what's in their silo. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know that somebody who is in the organization, there's been a lot of work to make roles more specialized. I know that sometimes folks like more generalist roles, but I think there is an advantage of, as an engineer, not having to schedule all of my emails, but having that done for me, not having to contact the customers. I know that we like to work with customers, but sometimes if we're scheduling meetings, if we're having things that a project manager can handle, it's beneficial. And I think across the organization, it helps everyone do more work that they like, which makes everyone happier. It makes working as a team more effective. Yeah, and I find it, I like it.
Yeah.
In terms of the structure, so you mentioned that as the company grows and we get more customers that are looking for a more structured experience, how have you found, as we've grown, dealing from that as the CEO, or COO, how has that process been on your end? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think it's understanding what is the foundation that you need, and then how do you grow that foundation as you kind of build on top of it, right? That's really the biggest analogy. So one good example is kind of our finance functions. So that area reports to me. We started with myself, part of the CEO's time. I can do some basic modeling, but I'm not an investment banker and that sort of thing. We also outsourced and brought in kind of fractional CFOs to help us through our seed fundraise, right? And what we learned pretty quickly is that was hard. That was really hard. There were so many moving parts, so many things moving around, and not having that experience of what it would take to kind of get the round closed. The number of iterations you would go through, the number of investors you need to talk to, the reliance on a legal team as well, right? In terms of as you're turning around term sheets. So that was probably one area that about 18 months ago, we brought in a VP of finance who is now our CFO. And we are now raising our Series A, and it is so much better. Because having somebody who has that experience base, who came in and said, yeah, this is how we're going to run this is how it's going to go. He was an investment banker, so that kind of helps from that perspective. And just kind of sets the confidence that he comes in with that skill set, makes the rest of the C-suite very comfortable in moving forward and not questioning things as much as well.
Yep.
All right. So my question for you, what are some of the tools and processes that have been developed that kind of help make things easier for you as an engineer?
Yep. Well, I'd say the Glue platform. So I'm going to try not to dive into the weeds of banking APIs, but the nitty gritty of what we do is if you go into the bank and you get a credit card, we're sending that. Well, we're sending that to a very secure location where the bank stores all their information, called the banking core. So what we have to do is connect those, and we have to work with the bankers on doing that. So it makes it very easy for us in that our platform lets you get an API stood up within a minute, and then from there you can connect all of the authentication issues that you have with core integrations. It makes it much easier to connect and to deal with those issues. Additionally, we do have great support for dealing with the errors that come up from these systems. A lot of them were built decades ago, actually before I was born. A lot of them are older than me. So a lot of the common practices that we see today with the errors, the format of them, et cetera, the verbosity of them, they don't have that. So it's sometimes very difficult to, first of all, understand what the issue is, and the second part of actually taking next steps to solve some of these problems you encounter. And it can be a bit stressful when you're sitting in front of a bunch of bankers and you're like, well, we can't proceed any further. Well, why not? Well, I don't know. The system's telling me that it's not working. So, yeah, that's some of the issues that you'll get being more of a technical person in this space. But our platform helps to make it really easy. And I've, especially the 2 years I have been here, it's made it easier to work in core integration and to deal with a lot of these issues. And it also helps with bringing down those timelines that I mentioned earlier as well. So I think the platform for me is the biggest one. But generally, that specialization of roles also helps in terms of the way that we break down our project, making sure that all of those landmines we can encounter ahead of time, we're asking those questions up front so that we make sure that when we're building it the first time, we're building it 95% to what we'll end up delivering. We try to get as close to 100% as possible, but it stops a lot of the wait. But there's one more thing that we need to add in, and the next week there's another one more thing, and that process can go on for some time. So it helps to, but by structuring the project as well by playing around with the way that it's structured, it helps solve a lot of these problems. And it's been a very fulfilling experience being able to be a part of it and to witness these timelines go down and to also deal with a more smooth experience on our end and for the customers as well.
Well, and one of the things, Eastman, I think you're underplaying is the fact of the environment is such and your skills are such, both from a technical side and then seeing the business problem, that you have created some of the solutions.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You see a need and you meet it. I think one of the core tenets at our company and at most startups is kind of that extreme ownership. So being willing to see a problem and to take it and to take it to solution to the end. That is something that's a balance as you grow and you move into more specialization, because you don't want to lose that core, I'd say, as kind of a culture type of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And diving into the concept of sawdust, I just mentioned errors and dealing with the core errors. Whenever I talk to anyone who deals with core integration, they have the same issue. We have dealt with well over tens of thousands of errors, and we have, whether it's Slack messages or internal documentation, we have tons and tons of documentation on this. So we're in the age of AI. These things are very queryable and searchable. It's very easy to organize all the information, query it, provide next steps for individuals and bankers who are using our platform. And it helps to reduce the ticket count. So it's a better experience for the customer, better experience for the engineer who's working on the system. So now instead of, well, I don't know, I can't read the error. Sorry, customer, you're going to have to let me get back to you later. We provide them some next steps. This is the error. It could be reason 1, 2, or 3, and therefore you will have some next steps to go off of. It makes everyone a lot more comfortable and at ease, which I think is very important. It's understated how important the feeling of the customers when going through their experience with the company. So it makes them a lot more comfortable. It instills a lot more confidence and trust as well. So that's one thing that, especially in the age of AI, for all the folks sitting there, what is some data that you have sitting around that you can organize and provide additional value for your engineers, your customers, the C-suite, and anyone who can get the value out of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jane, so one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, how has the current macroeconomic environment affected the company, and have there been any major changes required?
Yeah, so I think the fintech landscape obviously has changed as interest rates have changed. So has the priorities of banks and priorities of actually every business, right? If we look across the startup ecosystem, fundraising is more difficult, and there's more challenges of what is it that consumers are looking for, in terms of moving from lending applications and lower interest rate environments more to deposits. So the bank's focus has really switched. So as an integration platform, that really gets to what are the different systems, what are the different fintechs, what are the different systems we can connect to that banks are looking to utilize as they develop new products to do so. I think looking at where banks are in their kind of digital transformation journey, a lot of people, I don't know if you're familiar with Cornerstone Advisors does a lot of research in the area. As they're kind of are looking for different ways to move quickly, because banks historically are not known for moving quickly, they're moving from building to potentially buying and partnering, right? So they're looking for what is that ecosystem of partners that they need in order to make that happen. So we've seen a shift in the types of integrations that we're doing, what customers are needing to use us for. Also just the evolution of our product. So we have, our CTO built the product overnight. I think he stayed up for 4 days straight to do the first iteration of the IDE. Now we have a full platform team as well as a product team. And it's really amazing to see that maturity of the product and thinking more about the users. So there's functionality and then the user journey. So how we kind of are layering that on top. We're still, I'd say, early days in terms of what that is and what that looks like. But as we're moving forward in that, we're also saying, how do we put it in the user's hands? So you don't have to be a coder to use it. You don't have to know Python to use it. So what are the things we need to do to kind of proliferate the usage?
Yeah, and I think on that topic, I mean, the mission of the company is to unlock fintech. So how can we make it so that it's very easy? Our CEO uses the analogy of his father making an API to book a loan. I don't know if we're there yet, but it's definitely much easier to do than when I started, and hopefully that trend continues so that eventually his father is able to make an API to book a loan. I will be jumping up for joy that the day that comes, because then fintech will truly be unlocked. But until then, it still will remain difficult, just a question of the degree of difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, and you think, if you look at the regulation and the regulatory environments moving that way with open banking and other opportunities to get to the point where anybody could kind of access their money from any means from doing that too. So, all right. When
So,
you,
go
it's
ahead.
I think my turn to ask you a question. All right, when you look at some of the technical growth opportunities that the company has, and especially as a young engineer, what do you think are the strongest opportunities for us?
I don't think anyone will be surprised that I'm going to say this, but AI. I think we're in the age of AI, and I think whatever way we can use it so that we're able to understand what's going on in our business, and then from there take action, make predictions, and really improve the customer journey. So there are many places that we can implement it. Talking about the sawdust, there's a lot of data that we can organize. I can think of, and it's just a question of who we're targeting. So if we're targeting engineers, can we build APIs automatically, or at least do a lot of the legwork of connecting two systems? That is a great opportunity for AI. I mentioned error messages earlier. That one, that's being delivered right now. But for other cases, you could imagine, this a C-suite having a full visibility into all of our data across all of our systems. So I think making the business more efficient and then making the customer journey and experience a lot better is the big opportunity that we have, and we're going to iterate and get there eventually. But I think that that we're working on it, we're implementing it, but I think that's the biggest place that we have for opportunity. Apart from just making the platform better, I think it will help make it better. But outside of that, I think that's where it is.
What about the proliferation of like API documentation? I just feel like there's so much out there that it can sometimes be overwhelming. Knowing how to approach it.
I think AI will be able to read those documents, and in terms of automatically building APIs, it would be able to read and hopefully automatically build it. But we'll have we could teach it to use the Glue platform. We've actually done some research on it. We could teach it to use the Glue platform, so we've made it easy for humans. We can make it easy for an LLM. It's just a question of how do we get the banker's knowledge in their head, translate it to something that an LLM can understand. We can understand it, so now we just need to do that work of getting an LLM to understand it and understand it in several different cases. That's the tough part. We can do a demo and we can have it understand 2, 3, 4 different cases, but to understand it across our 100 customers and all of the different products that they have, it's a lot more. It's a much more difficult task. Understanding error messages and what you could do next, a bit simpler. So we'll start with that first, and then from there, we can deliver more value over time. So as the company has grown, what is some of the value you've seen from networks? So we're here at Startup Boston. We're meeting a lot of folks. Are there some resources or networks that a technical founder should leverage, and especially to grow in the earlier stages?
Yeah, I think one of the aspects of a company with technical co-founders is trust is very key and very important and very hard to earn. A lot of technical co-founders are like, well, they can understand every base problem no matter where it is in the business. And so understanding what different experience and the value that can bring, is kind of, you go through the trenches together and then you kind of earn the trust, from that perspective. So I think for startup founders and in early stage, I've worked with over 300 startups in the past decade. And I would say networks have been a critical part of that initial hiring of the core team. Really came through networks. The Sandbox Banking went through, I think, 4 accelerators probably, in the day. So Y Combinator obviously, has a great reputation, and part of it is the networks that it has, whether you're using the work at a startup job site, or they also have their own internal Slack, or actually it's like a Facebook. It's I forget what they call it. It's not Facebook, but it's like a Facebook where people can put in their threads and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So really having the resources there to connect, whether you're looking to connect with customers, whether you're looking to connect with potential employees or investors, or actually technology partners. Network effect is huge for us because we are primarily sold by partners. Most of the time what's happening is a bank is very interested in, like, they're looking for a new loan origination platform, or they're looking for a digital banking platform. We are kind of that glue behind the scenes that's really doing that connectivity for them. So really having a robust partner network is how we've been able to kind of build that network effect. So what happens is a customer will come to us because they need to connect their nCino loan origination platform. We do that for them. Then they're like, oh, you can do that? Can you also connect this and connect this? And so then we have that opportunity to increase the stickiness with that customer by selling them additional integrations and actually helping to enable their digital transformation across the board. So it's huge.
Yeah. So what was, changing gears a bit, what was the biggest surprise to you?
Biggest surprise. I think, when you work at companies of different sizes, larger and smaller, what I really still love is how kind of upfront and transparent people are. We have kind of our core values. We call it a tricks framework. But to me, transparency is one of the biggest ones. And it's one of the hardest ones to balance at different stages in the company. But I don't feel like there's like a group on the side having back conversations or otherwise. It's really very transparent, and people value your opinion, and you're a part of those conversations and in making those decisions. So I think to me, the transparency and the access to, everybody has access to everyone. I mean, we're only 35 people, but we are fully remote. So it's not always easy we're in like 22 states, right, with 35 people. So it's not always easy to find each other, but you can just do a huddle on Slack and say, hey, can I talk to you about this for a second, or that? And it could be any topic on anything. So that's, yeah.
And I'd say
For you, yeah.
Yeah, for
Sorry.
me. And for engineers out there, but the technical problem often isn't the most difficult problem. A lot of times it's a human problem. The technical problem can be solved very simply. Then you have to make sure you're incorporating into workflows. You have to get buy-in from all the different folks. And I can see some folks nodding their head. So this isn't anything new to you guys, but it was new to me a few years ago. I'm still getting the hang of it, but yeah, I still find myself learning that. It's like, oh, wow, we built this demo, quite quickly. I thought it was going to amaze everyone, but this team doesn't, they're going to need to change their behavior, and they're not changing their behavior. So how do we get them to do it? And how can we sweeten the deal so that they're getting additional value out of it, so that they are incentivized to change their behavior? So there are a lot of questions that you have to ask that aren't necessarily related to any code, API, or banking cores, once you've done all that work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can I do a quick poll of the audience? How many people work at a startup today? How many people are looking to work at a startup? Nice. So in terms of, as you think about these sorts of events, it's that connectivity that you create here, right? That partnering that you can do here, whether it's a matter of just having a conversation in the hallway, like the number of people we have hired because we have met them through different events. Yeah, right? He was at the DCU FinTech Center, interning there, and then met him through that, and then we're able to hire him. I'm very, very happy about that. But yeah, it's always about that connectivity of like how you meet people randomly. What may seem random has as much opportunity as an interview. So from that perspective.
And my final question for you is, over your career, more generally, how has the importance of paying it forward manifested itself to you?
Yeah, I mean, well, the reason I'm in this role is a lot of it because of that. So when we stood up the FinTech Sandbox, we wanted to have a code repository where we would ask our startups, hey, we're a nonprofit. If you guys can contribute code to make it easier for the next person using that data set, like whether it's from S&P or Thomson Reuters at the time, like if you can make it easier for others to use it. And in the early days, we only had a couple people willing to do it, and it was Ravi and Sky. So, knowing that you had people who were in it to help others, to move things forward, has really actually defined my career, at least, the second half so far. So, all right. That's, yeah. Questions? Yes, anyone have any
Questions?
questions? Yes, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
What was it? Oh, sorry.
Oh,
One
no,
of us
please.
calls. All right, we'll start here and we'll go that way. Yeah.
I was wondering, are you seeing thanks. Are you seeing the growth of data lakes within banks as we have to do less integration because we're going to dump everything into the lake and then everybody can go and drink from the lake? Or is the promise of that, which is my personal guess, more of a promise for the future and no one's really far enough for that to eat into the market opportunity for direct integration? So I'm just wondering, like, when you think about where you're going, do you see the data lake as maybe being a threat, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's an opportunity as well. I don't think it's matured quite to the degree that you want. And then also, as folks are trying to, data lakes are great, and everyone is trying to get a lot of banks out of the data out of their core systems. So whether
Yeah.
that's in a data warehouse, a data lake, or somewhere else, being able to lift it out of systems that don't allow you to do a lot with it. You still have to decide what you want to do with it. So having that, the data science tools and being able to do that is key. But what we found is it's not quite mature enough or you still need a good technology team
Yeah.
in-house to really be able to get the value out of it.
Right.
And what we found with most of the banks and credit unions we work with, unless you're like a big regional bank or a city bank,
Even
you
the
don't
big regional banks are not.
yeah, you don't have the people and the skills to be able to do that. So having an iPass that has kind of the code already built, it just makes it a lot easier to translate between the business need and the.
And then one other quick question. When you said your original product was about making data available to the customers of your customers, what kind of data was that? Was that more like S&P kind of done in Bradstreet stuff, or was this like loan level, like the M's and the Q's that the banks
Yeah.
are sending to the Fed?
So the nonprofit that gives the data, so it has about 40 different data partners or so. We wanted it all. We wanted it all. We wanted to have. So we started with the S&P data, the data that was costly, because as a startup you could spend
Right.
20 grand on just data access, and that's a huge hurdle when you're just trying. You don't have a customer yet. You're trying to demo your product and to show it. The holy grail would be getting the detailed banking transaction data and the loan level data. But that was kind of really what you needed is the AI to kind of build the anonymized data sets.
Yeah.
Because just too much risk on the other
Yeah.
side. So that's happened. It's been a bit slower, but yeah, all of the data.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. I have a question about those early days in the startup. So around the time maybe you have a skateboard or a product and you're looking for those first design partners, but you're in a highly regulated industry and you have a whole bunch of compliance concerns. Any tips for navigating compliance when you want to go to that first design partner, but they require SOC 2? Mm-hmm. Do you then pivot and do SOC 2, or do you do something else to be able to engage with that customer without necessarily having to pursue all that?
You have to do SOC 2. At the end of the day, that was really one of the biggest, blockers in the early days for the company, and it was just like there's no way around it. You can work with some of the larger firms, but there also are a lot of smaller firms that will actually help work with startups on getting their SOC 2. So it isn't as much of a cash outlay up front, but there really isn't a way around it. At least in our industry with banks and credit unions, you don't want to try to go around it because really you spend a lot of your sales processes just getting rid of the no's, right? Like, well, you don't have this or you don't have that. And that's like number one. And but it's amazing once you have that, what it opens. So I will say the SOC 2 then is taking that question off the table makes everything else so much easier from that. Because usually you're working on the other stuff to try to eliminate those no's. But if you can get rid of that, then it's huge.
Esmond,
Yes.
I heard you say a little bit earlier that part of what you do, or perhaps a lot of what you do, is being able to unlock the fintech.
Yep.
And there's a lot to be done there. My question is, as along a development standpoint, as I look at the tasks of a fintech getting to market, the API is one thing, but it's the custom code, that's required, the program code,
Yep.
to integrate with that client's application. And the client really doesn't know what they want until they see the code. And then all of a sudden, oh, what we really wanted is this, this, and that. So again, my premise is that what's holding those fintechs back is that the large amount of custom code that they have to write and rewrite. So having said that, and I've got my own answer to this question, but having said that, what are a lot of the fintechs doing? Are they using JavaScript? Are they using, Spring Boot? Or, where are they getting a leverage here?
So in terms of the language, they can use a ton of different languages. Python, I'd say, is pretty popular for that. But in terms of the custom code, that's what makes it so that you can't have a plug and play, unfortunately. So that's where the Glue platform really shines. It makes
I'm sorry, I missed that name.
The Glue platform. So that's the
Glue,
platform
yeah,
that we have. I can't praise it enough. It makes that part really easy. So you can just click in, you can add your custom logic, and the rest runs as is. So I think in terms of making unlocking fintech further, it's then that translation of now we know that we can write the code. How do we get the bankers, or how do we get the tech to understand what the bankers want and then deliver on that? And as you said earlier as well, where they don't really know what they want until they have it in front of them, you run into that problem where you're going to have something where you can give them some tests and they can then judge them. And from there, it will update and give them some other tests. So there are a lot of steps that will make it so that it's unlocked for a banker to go in and let them know, tell the API what it wants done. But I think the technology is there. It's just a question of the sweat equity, who's going to do it.
So for an application development system, so to speak, sounds like what you're working with, have you given some thought to object technologies, building based upon objects, or, composable systems?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And
Can you talk to that a little bit? Yeah.
Yep, I will. So we have, and I think that is the future. The big difficulty there is when you're integrating all these systems, they're largely structured the same way, but it's when you get into the weeds that it's slightly different here, slightly different there. There's some similarities across different systems, and then they have their peculiarities. So it's a question of building for all of those different flavors. Some of the systems, some of their APIs are built in one way, others are built in the other. So you have the same system. When you're sending a request, you need to enter the same fields in one way. When you're getting a response in a different way. So there's all this nuance that is required. So it's a question of it's a question of the sweat equity as well. And then the testing. So you need a system that's very flexible. Going back to the earlier point, you need to get the system you want, you need a system that's very flexible where you can add in that custom logic, but also very structured and understands all of these different systems. So there's a balance that needs to be achieved there.
Now, it sounds like multiple iterations very, very quickly is key.
Yep.
Yeah, and starting user acceptance testing almost from the get-go.
Yep.
Once you're doing the requirements, you're like, okay, well, give us some test examples.
Exactly.
What's your 80/20? What's
Yep.
80% of your loans? What do they look like? And then
They
and
don't
then you
really
see what
know
falls
a lot of
out.
times.
Yeah.
No, that's why you're like, go into your system,
Yeah.
find your problem children, bring
Everybody
them
wants
out,
to do
right?
that.
Yeah, and then
All right,
see
thank
what
you very
falls out.
much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great questions. All right. Any other? Oh.
Hey, how's it going? Quick question. It's more of maybe a inspiration and motivation question, but in businesses like finance, or I'm more interested sort of in the legal side of things too, is technology, are you seeing an opportunity for technology to really like take off in these spaces, or for something like banking, where it's an antiquated sort of old school legacy, put X in a 401k and you get this by the time you retire. Are you seeing this take off, start to move really? Obviously, Sandbox is doing some great work, but is this something that just is going to exponentially explode, or is this grinding it out, hard work for this industry specifically?
No, it's good. I'd say historically it's been grinding it out, since, having to say like, okay, what are the issues we have to go after? But it is taking off. I think with AI, there's you're seeing a lot more people in the space just entering it. Like they may start out in an adjacent space and say, hey, this one's ripe for the taking. Why aren't we going after this problem? Like, there's so many easy ways to build APIs and to absorb the data. Why does it have to be this way? Which I think is great, because when the guys started in 2015, I was like, you're crazy, so it has shifted. There's been a big shift. There's a shift because consumers are demanding different things, right? You want to do your banking on your phone. You don't want to have to go in. No one's going into branches anymore. Like COVID has accelerated that transformation. And I do think banks are trying to change, trying to move. The niche demographics, people want to do things differently. You want to treat small businesses that are barbershops different than you treat ones that are car washes, right? There's so many different nuances that people are looking for and how they're being treated, that hyper-personalization that banks have to adjust. It's not an option anymore. Now, with that said, the regulatory environment is still tough, right? Because we want to protect consumers. We don't want people to be taken advantage of. So how do you balance that? And how do you kind of get the regulators to kind of go along and to be, more work together with both the fintechs and the banks and credit unions, as opposed to kind of being siloed.
Yep. And I'll also add, on top of that, you also have to consider the security of who owns the model that you are sending all this information to. If you're sending it to a third party, do the banks know? And what happens if a bunch of data leaks? So those are also some questions that will come up, but I think generally there is opportunity. I mean, we see co-pilots and repos where you can go in and do some smart search on regulation and stuff like that in basically every industry. So at least in the early days, that's what it's looking like. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. One of the challenges startups have is picking a direction and then realizing they're on the wrong one. So we call that a pivot. Do you have a pivot story that you can share with us?
Well, yeah. So pretty much the company did pivot. So it started in robo advisory. So trying to build an app that their friends and family could use to invest. And then I think it was a mix of realizing the problem was that banks, when you try to do it like for a banker so they could talk to their customers, to get the data moving across the different systems was the kind of the big reason for the pivot. But the other reason for the pivot is with two technical co-founders, to understand and to talk to customers and to have a consumer-facing product was a big challenge. And they realized maybe we're out of our depth in trying to build a consumer product. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Along those lines, as technical co-founders, what did you do to address the gaps in your business knowledge, business acumen, and operations?
Yeah, so I think part of it was we talk about like the network effect, right? So having networks that you can talk to kind of understand what's going to happen next. The idea of accelerators is really helpful because as a startup for the first, I don't know, probably 3 or 4, we're 5 plus 6 years in now. You want to talk to people that are about 6 months ahead of you. You want to talk to startups who maybe have, just expanded to that 20th customer or just realized, they needed to do, a post-seed, raise, those sorts of things. Having those networks really helps you to kind of say, okay, when did you decide to bring in a salesperson into your business? Are you facing the same market I'm facing? Are you dealing with the same customer base I'm dealing with, or is it something different? So I think it's asking those questions as you grow and having that network around you. Like I said, I think part of it was realizing when you have anybody doing more than 50% of their time is something outside what you hired them for, then you're like, okay, maybe we need to get an expert in this area. I know for myself, it's like I'll ask 3 people, and if all of them are like, yeah, you need to get an expert, like it's not something that you can't split yourself any more ways, right? To actually try to take it on and to do it, that you need to bring in that specialist and you need to bring in that knowledge. It's, I used to say it's more like, I know what I don't know more than probably I know what I know. So being honest with yourself with that question of like, I know what I don't know. And I talked to 3 people and they're still, and they don't know. I need to bring in a specialist to kind of help me do that. But
Hi, thank you both. This has been intriguing, especially on the solutions engineering side, right? Because talking with customers is like lifeblood. So I've been working with some people about knowledge management, or what particularly knowledge management means in the age of AI. And so, it's not even the worries and the risk of hallucination. It's not the worry about auto-generated documentation because, I don't know, we developers are too lazy to write. No, it's not even that, or about retraining based on that stuff. It really has to do, as a founder myself, is really how do we explore and capture the context, like Eastman, what you said really triggered me into thinking about this, was, the banker has things in their head, right? An engineer has things in their head, but engineer wants to ask some domain-specific questions without necessarily having to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get that response from the other human being. So, like, why couldn't we have, in your IDE, ask a banker, a fake banker, a question about the domain, just like we explore this stuff with ChatGPT and get out the knowns and unknowns, but that's somebody else's business. In general, the general abstract question is, if knowledge management is actually one of the things that people who have invested a lot of time in their life to become experts at, and now all of a sudden you don't have to ask them anymore, that's a natural, they'll be
Tension.
averse
Yeah.
to helping capture their own thoughts and then put them out. So maybe a practical question is how often in your space, like a banker, or in my case, a farm owner, but in your case, a banker, is interested in outpouring all their information in a way that could be trained, that an LLM could be trained on.
So it might be counterintuitive, but you mentioned that people might feel a bit obsolete if they tell you everything. But people love talking about themselves, so I think generally that's what wins out when you ask about their business, and also banks. Banks have their own custom products, their own custom processes. And from my experience, they like to tell you. Sometimes they will make you feel like an idiot if you're asking about simple stuff in their bank, just to make sure that your assumptions are correct. Because sometimes the simple stuff in one bank is a completely custom product in another. So if you go in thinking it's this custom product and then you're going to look like an idiot again. So I think that's generally, they like to talk about themselves. They like to inform you about the company that they work for and the things that they do. But then also generally more so, I mean, they want their product to be integrated with another product. So they're going to let us know what we need to so that we understand their product, so that we are able to deliver the value they're looking for and that we all win in the end. But I will say finally that I'm not super worried about for the bankers. I'm not super worried about them being obsolete anytime soon, because of that customization. As a gentleman here earlier said, there's a lot of customization in these banks. So they don't make it simple for plebeians to understand. I don't think it's going to be the easiest thing for AI to understand what all of the different banks are doing and the way that they're all customized as well. So I think they're a bit protected from that.
No, but it's going to be really interesting like on the knowledge base of like what that looks like going forward. We're struggling with it now. Even like we're like, all right, let's try this. Let's ask them these questions, or trying different methods. And yeah, it's exciting. Right? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. I think.
Well, yeah.
So, sorry, Gene, relative to what you just said, trying to get the banks to tell you what it is, and it's very hard. Have you experimented with any kind of collaboration platforms that allow people to look at, code samples or code definitions and this kind of thing, but also to collaborate. So once we decide on something, it's in the code or it's in the data dictionary already.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the platform is, if you're not comfortable with code, our platform at times can be slightly overwhelming if you just looked at it. So we kind of have like that journey of how you can actually see where we'll ask you to say, hey, the APIs have all of these fields. Here's how they're defined. Here's what we think they're translated to. Which ones do you think apply to you? And they can do that, and then they can see that being built in the code. So we do try to create that opportunity. It's kind of, you got to meet both ways, right? You need the engineer to meet and understand the business problems and the business processes, but then you also need the business folks to understand a little bit of what that's going to look like and translate into. So we do use that with some of our platform, but yeah, I'd say there's definitely other opportunities to use additional, how we use our data dictionary, how we build our data dictionary. I think, yeah.
Yep.
Great. All right. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you both so much, and thank you all for your time. We have a lot more in store for both today and the rest of the week, and we also have our welcome party presented by HPE right here at 6 p.m. at Suffolk University out in the lobby. And in this room specifically, the next session is Getting Past Go, bringing your startup out of the idea stage. And if that's not what you're looking for, you can change rooms, and our folks at the registration desk out front can help you get where you need to be. And if you're joining us virtually, you don't need to go anywhere. Just hang tight, and we'll be right back with the next session. And yeah, see you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.